The sound of laughter echoed through the military checkpoint like the sound of mockery itself, sharp, careless, and cruel. A young woman stood silently before them, her old canvas bag clutched tightly in her trembling hands. Her clothes were simple, her shoes worn, and her face pale from the heat of the afternoon sun. To the soldiers standing guard, she looked like just another visitor, someone out of place among the steel, order, and pride of the military academy. But what they didn't know was that the moment they unzipped that old bag, history was about to silence their laughter forever. Private Karim chuckled as he shook his head. What could a woman like her possibly have in that bag? He muttered while others joined in his amusement. The young woman said nothing. She simply stood there, eyes lowered, shoulders steady. Her silence made them more curious. The bag looked light, yet it had the kind of weight that didn't come from things. It came from stories, from years, from memories too heavy to carry yet impossible to set down. When the soldiers began pulling items out, a faded uniform cap, an old photograph, a medal wrapped in cloth, their laughter started to fade. The sunlight hit the metal insignia, revealing its dull gold sheen. Fleet Command, Northern Division. Private Karim froze mid-motion. His laughter died first. The others fell silent next. The air changed, heavy with an unspoken tension. And then, footsteps approached. Slow, firm, carrying authority. The soldiers straightened immediately as Captain Raymond walked toward them. His gaze was stern, his voice even. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Nobody answered. The young woman finally looked up, her eyes meeting his. For a moment he stared, confusion flickering across his face. Something about those eyes, calm, deep, commanding, reminded him of someone he'd once seen on a battlefield report. Someone who'd changed the course of a war. He reached for the medal she had carried, examining it closely. The edges were worn smooth by time, but the engraved name was still visible. Admiral Sara Malik. His breath caught. The soldiers' faces turned pale. They looked at the woman again, her weathered hands, the faint scar across her wrist, the quiet authority in her posture. It all made sense now. The woman they had just mocked was not a visitor, not a civilian. She was her. The hero whose name had once echoed through every naval base in the country. Sara Malik had once commanded a fleet of destroyers during the Northern conflict. At just 29, she had been the youngest officer ever promoted to admiral after leading an impossible rescue mission, bringing home 317 trapped soldiers through a storm and enemy blockade. But after the war ended, she disappeared from public life, refusing interviews, awards, or recognition. The media called her a mystery. The soldiers called her a legend. But none of them knew what her silence truly meant. When the captain finally realized who stood before him, he snapped to attention. With a sharp motion, he raised his hand to his forehead and saluted. The soldiers followed, trembling. "Admiral," he said quietly, his voice shaking with respect. "Forgive us." Sara didn't answer at first. She looked at each of them, her gaze steady, not angry but infinitely sad. "You have nothing to apologize for," she finally said, her voice calm but carrying a weight that silenced even the wind. "You only forgot what respect looks like when it's not wearing a uniform." The captain's throat tightened. The soldiers' eyes glistened with shame. One by one, they lowered their heads. As the moment stretched, Sara turned her gaze to the academy gates beyond them. The same gates she had once walked through decades ago as a young cadet, full of fire and hope, unaware of how much pain and glory the years would bring. She had come today not for recognition, but to quietly deliver her late mentor's belongings to the memorial hall, the man who had taught her everything about leadership, compassion, and courage. But fate, it seemed, had its own plan. To remind those who serve that true greatness often walks quietly, without medals, without titles, without the need to be seen. The captain insisted on escorting her to the hall personally. As they walked, silence followed her like a shadow. The younger recruits stood in line, eyes wide, whispering as they realized who she was. Some even saluted, tears in their eyes. She acknowledged none of it. She simply walked forward, calm and humble, her presence more powerful than any speech. When they reached the memorial, Sara placed the folded flag and her mentor's old photograph beside the marble plaque. She whispered something too softly for anyone to hear, then stood straight, her expression distant. Not proud, not broken, just deeply human. For her, every battle, every scar, every salute had led to this in a quiet moment of farewell, unseen by the world, yet more honorable than any ceremony. As she turned to leave, Captain Raymond's voice broke the silence. "Ma'am," he said softly, "why did you never return to command? The Navy still remembers your name." Sarah paused for a long moment. "Because," she said slowly, "some wars don't end when the gunfire stops. Some keep fighting inside you." Then she smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "And I chose peace." The captain's salute trembled as he watched her walk away, not like a hero or an officer, but like a mother who had given everything she had to protect the children of her nation. The wind caught her scarf, lifting it slightly, and for a brief second it looked like the flag itself bowed to her. When she disappeared beyond the gates, no one dared to move. The soldiers who had mocked her stood frozen, their faces wet with shame. They had laughed moments ago, but now they could barely breathe under the weight of what they had witnessed. They had mocked a legend, and she had forgiven them with grace they didn't deserve. Later that evening, the captain stood in front of his men and said only one thing: "Never measure someone by what you see. The greatest soldiers are the ones who no longer wear their medals." And from that day on, whenever a new recruit joined the academy, the story of Admiral Sara Malik was told, not as a tale of war, but as a lesson in humility, respect, and the quiet strength of those who never stop serving, even in silence. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like and share it. Your support helps keep these real, emotional stories alive for the next generation. Special request: comment below. What does true respect mean to you? I'd love to read your thoughts.